just be this constant churning story that you couldn't look away from, that eclipsed everybody else, and that drove the news cycle on Twitter, on cable media, on newspaper headlines. And the one thing that Trump has really lost since January 6th, since he was deplatformed, was his ability to do that. He just doesn't have the outlet he once did. And as we can see, I mean, he launched his presidential campaign 3 weeks ago, and it's pretty much been crickets ever since then. He really, the only real topic of conversation was his dining with white nationalists, and that's sort of not the kind of press that you want when you're trying to launch a White House bid. But what has replaced that, the guy who's driving the news cycle all day and all night, is now Elon Musk. And if that lane is occupied by Musk, it's going to make it awfully difficult for Trump to become what he once was.
Well, what if that lane is occupied by Elon Musk, and then Elon Musk then goes and decides to get behind someone like Ron DeSantis, for example?
Well, I think it's problematic for Trump, and you can see this in all sorts of ways. I mean, in the column, I looked at Twitter followers. Musk has 50 million more. I looked at Google search mentions. Elon Musk is easily eclipsing Donald Trump. But I think what's even more important from a political standpoint is if you go to a place like Breitbart News, the hard-right news site to help launch Donald Trump, they now have a vertical on Elon Musk, and they're writing about his Twitter stuff every day. And Trump is almost an afterthought. He's sort of buried at the bottom of the page. He's not interesting or new anymore. He's not fun and exciting. And I think most important of all, from a kind of a modest standpoint, is that he's not out there causing controversy and upsetting Democrats and owning the libs, which is what Elon Musk is doing, which is irresistible to the kind of online contingent of Trump fans that elevated him, to national prominence in the past, and I think who Trump is counting on to do it again this time around. They seem to have abandoned him, at least for the time being, for Elon Musk.
So it's so interesting. You have data in here to back that up, that Musk is upsetting the Democrats. If you look at NBC polls and the like, Democrats, like you say, voters think he's Darth Vader, which is interesting because at the end of the day, I mean, he's just like a super rich guy with a bunch of companies.
Yeah, he is. In the past, he'd always been a super rich guy who was sort of, interesting and made cool things and was controversial, but wasn't sort of obviously political in any way. But for whatever reason, he's gone out of his way to kind of reveal himself as a right-wing troll, and it's certainly gotten the reaction that I think Musk was intending to get. The Democrats are up in arms. A lot of Democrats in Congress want to kind of haul him in and question him. He's become kind of the chief bad guy for the American left. And it's a position much like Trump that he seems to revel in. He loves the notoriety and the attention. It's not really clear to me how this is going to help Twitter succeed as a business, or what, Musk's end goal might be. But I think one thing we can conclude in terms of the political effect in the near term is, like I said, it's put a damper on Trump's presidential race. And part of the effect of that, I think, is that it's going to open up a lane for other people to run for president and really get the attention that Trump has prevented other candidates from getting. So whether it's Ron DeSantis, who Elon Musk has spoken favorably about, or somebody else, I think that it's much easier to imagine somebody new taking over the Republican Party today than it was a month ago before Elon Musk took over Twitter and started tweeting in earnest.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable to see what the shift that has happened, and the way that the kind of echo chamber has been filled by Elon Musk. Josh, I should note you are the author of Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. The book came out back in 2017. It's a New York Times bestseller. You spent a lot of time reporting on the space in this area. What are your sources telling you about the way they think about Donald Trump right now and potentially throwing their support behind someone else? Because if we were having this conversation back in 2015, there were a lot of people saying, okay, Trump is never going to get past the primary. And then as soon as he got past the primary, everybody threw their weight behind him.
Yeah, I mean, I called the subject of that book actually for this column, Steve Bannon, because, as a former Trump Svengali and as a former Breitbart News, editor-in-chief, I felt like he has a better sense of the MAGA psyche than anybody else, and he was fully on board with the thesis that Elon Musk has studied Trump and knows how to say outrageous things and drive the news cycle. I thought what was interesting was the way he kind of boiled it down to a media story. You know, he told me a story that I only partially recount in the column about how he used to sit with Trump in the White House watching CNN, and when Trump would get bored, he would say, hey, watch this, and he would tweet. And a couple minutes later, CNN would pick up the tweet and start talking about it. The point Bannon made to me was that Elon Musk has that power now. You know, he starts tweeting about Hunter Biden, and suddenly the news media is covering that story. He starts tweeting about Anthony Fauci, and the media kind of moves over there. So it's really interesting the way that Musk has sort of emulated that. What's sort of puzzling, and even Bannon hasn't really figured out, is how much of an impediment it's going to be to Trump, and what are really going to be the effects in the Republican primary. If Musk were to champion a particular candidate, you'd have to imagine with the media reach he has now that would go a long way toward helping that person. You know, so far he hasn't, but his interests seem awfully fickle and seem to kind of change every day or every hour. So there's no reason to think that he couldn't at some point.
Well, if he were to back Trump, for example, would this sort of right what's wrong in terms of Trump becoming irrelevant, or does this speak to a broader issue with Trump that we haven't really been hearing a lot about him?
I don't think that Trump necessarily needs Elon Musk's endorsement. I mean, Musk opened the door to get him back on Twitter if he wants to go back, and he's chosen not to so far. I think what's more dangerous to Trump, and this goes beyond just Elon overshadowing him, is that he's no longer, you know, interesting and exciting and vital. You know, when Trump came on the scene, he was this transgressive boundary breaker, but he also had a lot of things he wanted to do. He talked about trade, he talked about immigration. And Trump these days is sort of devolved into kind of complaining about the 2020 election, which really isn't that interesting to people.
Right.
And I think that there's been a broad sense among Republicans, and you saw it in the results of the midterm election, that just isn't a message